All right, hey y'all, what's going on? I wanted to jump on camera and talk about something. I feel like some people do better listening and watching information than they do reading some of my long form newsletter, post or whatever you want to call it, those things. I mean, it's all good information from the heart, but maybe it's easier to listen and watch. And this was something I was kind of passionate and excited about. So I just recently got done reading this book called Cracking the Aging Code. And I was excited to read it. There's a lot of good reviews from a lot of the people that I follow, a lot of the biohackers, and said some really good things about it. And I try to get through at least one book a week, in addition to like the podcast and things that we read. And it was a really good book. Like it had some profound insights. I was expecting to read it, and at the end of it had this list of all these different things that we could do to live like eternally or something like that, and definitely didn't get that information. I think what it did more than anything was confirm a lot of the things that I've intuitively known for a while now, and that we talk about a little bit here and there, but we don't really tie it into aging. And so I just wanted to share some of these points with you so that I can confirm, and we can confirm some of the things that we're doing for health, because they're so great. And now it's so good to know that they're so great for long-term health and slowing aging. By the way, I'm going to live to be 143, and I'm going to live like happily and healthily and be doing all my fitness stuff and just watch and see, because we know a lot. We know a lot more than our ancestors did, and we have access to a lot more stuff, which is really interesting, because there's like this spectrum of people, or there's this population of people like us that are tapped into this like super health information, and then there's the part of the population that is in the opposite direction, and their longevity and lifespan and all that stuff is in the opposite direction. So it's our responsibility to bring this stuff to as many people as we can, because everyone needs the gift of this information. Yeah. About to go off on a tangent there. So I think most people's sense of logic would go like this. As an animal species, well, first of all, the anti-aging code, what I really liked about it, super thought-provoking. It started out with this evolutionary perspective, talking about evolutionary biology, Darwinism, neo-Darwinism, all these different things that people think in the whole evolutionary biology realm, all the like prominent thinkers and scientists and things like that. And it's so funny, because in that realm there's all these rigid beliefs to things that probably aren't correct or accurate, but it's just been the way that everybody's done things, just like we learn things are done in this health realm. So anyway, it just went through this whole evolutionary biology, just explanation and trying to figure out like what is the purpose of aging, because when you really think about it, if from an evolutionary perspective, it doesn't make sense for as an individual, for as I get older, for my health to decline and eventually for me to die of old age. But from a population perspective, it actually kind of makes sense, because you have to understand that this world and life in general is evolving as a community, and so it's not just about the individual. Some things that don't serve the individual serve the community or serve the population. I think that was one of the big things that I took away from it. So I think most people's common sense logic thinking might go like this. If I have access to plenty of food all the time, then I'm probably going to live better and longer. And if I mitigate or minimize my exposure to toxins and stressors and pathogens and anything and everything that I can control, then I'm probably going to live healthier and longer. And what we find is that's not the case at all. So part of this book was this realization that if we always have plenty and we're always shielded from things, we may live well, but we're not going to live long. Okay? Contrast that with a person or species or a segment of the species that are stressed hormetically, and hormetically means it's a stressor that's beneficial in small amounts. So as an example, a hormetic stressor would be fitness. If I do some punctuated fitness and I back off of it, that healing and adaptation response to fitness is actually extremely helpful. Now, if I worked out all the time nonstop, I'd kill myself, so that's not good. So hormetic means punctuated doses. It's beneficial because of the adaptation response, and hormetic stressors, we see them everywhere. Like fasting is a hormetic stressor. If I fast all the time, I'd starve to death. But fasting punctuated periodically is actually extremely beneficial for health. So anyway, so if I have plenty and I'm shielded from everything, then I might live well, but I'm not going to live long. Contrasted it with if I live in scarcity and I have these hormetic stressors on a regular basis, on an individual basis, it makes me stronger, and I live well and I live longer. That's a good quote. And I just came up with that. That rhymed. All right. So how hormesis plays into aging, these are my notes that I took on the book. So it reduces overpopulation when things are plentiful. So it means that if we have a group or a species or a group within a species and everything is moving along great and there's just plenty and fertility is coming with ease and there's having a lot of babies and proliferate and all this stuff, then aging is something that counters that by decreasing the population over time, or at least managing that to some degree, because things are so plentiful. Otherwise, we would just continue to populate and overgrow all our resources and foods and water and whatever things we need to survive and live. Now, the opposite of that would be like if we have a species or a population that's going through some times of scarcity, but also being stressed a lot. From an evolutionary perspective, the aging would decrease, or the aging effect would decrease, because we need those individuals to survive and pass on that next generation. And so it's as if, having scarcity and having stressors makes an individual more strong and resilient because of this aging or anti-aging effect. And I hope that makes sense, right? So from a population perspective, if things are too plentiful, we run the risk of overpopulating. And so aging helps to minimize that. And on the opposite end of that spectrum, if things are scarce and there's a lot of stressors, then the strongest survive and we pass on those traits to others, but also the aging has less of an impact because we need those people to live and keep proliferating. Okay, so here was my recommended takeaways from the book, and it's a really great book. It was a long read, but if you like to do that kind of thing, I listen to Audible books and they're great. So I spend time like driving and when I'm on my walks and stuff listening. So the body is less fuel efficient and nutrient efficient when there's plenty to eat, okay? And that's an absolute truth. So when there's excess nutrients and excess calories, specifically excess energy, then the body has a really hard time dealing with that. And the solution to that is to not eat so often, and to eat for nutrient density, and to make sure that you have space, and to make sure that you're varying space, and to make sure that in general, as you're eating, as you're going through this holistic health journey that we're all on, trying to figure out how much to eat and when to eat and all that kind of stuff, you always want to err on the side of less is more. I think a lot of us get into this health realm, and it's like we feel like, okay, if I'm eating the right stuff, I can eat as much as I want, as often as I want, as long as we're following our basic rules. And I'd say that is definitely a step in a better direction compared to the way that we were doing things before. But now, once we get immersed into this realm, we want to start thinking in terms of less is more. We want to think in terms of not what can I get away with and still feel amazing, how little can I get away with and still feel amazing? That's where I'm at right now. How much space can I nurture? How little can I go without? Or something along those lines, right? Because it's like you want to have that perfect balance of giving the body what it needs while being just short of being in excess. Because from an adaptation and evolutionary perspective, that's very hormetic. It's like a beneficial stressor, right? We want to focus on nutrients versus total food intake. So if excess calories can be an issue, or excess energy can be an issue, if I can focus on nutrient-dense foods, then number one, I'm helping to mitigate this whole aging effect. And number two, it tends to be more satiating in the first place, which means I'm going to have less signals of wanting to eat more anyway, which is why you always see me trying to eat crazy things like Braunschweiger and head cheese and liverwurst and bugs and insects and organ meats and all that kind of stuff. I don't think that's very strange. I just think it's strange for Americans, because we've been so disconnected from that way of eating. But anyway, I'm not saying that you have to do that. What I'm saying is we want to focus on nutrient density, which is why we have all our little guidelines in our program about eating fatty cuts, bone in, skin on, getting a synergy of nutrients. When I eat plant matter, I'm not just going to eat iceberg lettuce. I mean, it's fine, but you want to eat for nutrient density as much as you can, because you're giving the body more of what it needs versus the potential for excess energy or excess calories. Exercise, contrary to popular belief with a lot of people, exercise does not contribute to wear and tear over time. Meaning, I still feel like this is a very prevalent way of thinking about fitness, is that the more I do now, then later in life it's going to catch up because I'm going to degenerate my joints and my cartilage, and eventually things are going to start to break down. But what we see is that it's actually the opposite of that. The more that I use my body, and of course giving it rest and recuperation and the nutrients it needs to recover, the more that I use my body, the more beneficial. And in fact, of all the different things that they talked about in this book that had an impact on anti-aging, exercise was going to be the most beneficial beneficial. And when they specifically talked about exercise, they talked about a lot of what we preach, which is very, strength, conditioning, flexibility, mobility, varying intensities, varying time domains, varying durations. As long as you're giving the body a chance to recover and recuperate, exercise and fitness tended to be the most beneficial thing to counter aging. So keep that in mind. If you're not doing something right now, you need to move in that direction. But it's a big reason that I'm a huge fan of the CrossFit Combine and what we do here, because we're not just CrossFit. We get people to move properly. We can take anyone from anywhere they are and put them through our progressions, and we start to see people just dramatically change, especially if they're doing things the way that we recommend with the food and all that stuff. You need to expose your immune system to stressors on a daily basis. And one thing is sun exposure. So sun exposure, constant nonstop, of course it's going to be extremely damaging for health, but sun exposure in small amounts, 5 to 15 minutes per day of direct sun exposure, not only gives you the synthesis of vitamin D and all the different synergy of things that happen at the level of the skin, it also helps with your moods, it helps with all kinds of different skin disorders. I mean, there's all kinds of health benefits that come from sun exposure, but also the radiation in small amounts is actually extremely beneficial. And we see people being healthier and living longer if they spend more time in the sun over time. And we're talking about non-burning sun exposure. We're not talking about going out and getting fried once every 3 months or once every 6 months or something like that. On the same note, being exposed to pathogens and exposing your microbiome and your immune system to all these different things is actually extremely beneficial. So I feel like I make a big deal about myself being kind of dirty and not caring about that kind of stuff. If I drop some food on the floor, I don't care about eating it, and I don't know. I feel like I do some crazy things compared to what most people think is normal. But the reason I do it is because in the back of my mind, it's like I want to build a really strong immune system, and the more that my immune system is exposed to different things, the more strong it's going to be, and the more beneficial it's going to be for my immune system. Contrast it with someone, if you're always cleaning yourself, you're super neurotic about cleansing and cleaning, and you're using hand sanitizers and antibacterial soaps all day, everywhere you can. I mean, that might serve you in the short term because you're not necessarily getting sick, but over the long term, we see less of a healthy and less of a productive immune system. So that was one of the big takeaways from this book too. And I'm not saying go out and do the opposite and immerse yourself in filth. And when we say dirty, by the way, we're not talking about like exposing yourself to chemicals and things that we know are extremely toxic. I'm talking about like being out in nature, having some dirt on yourself and some dirt on your food. I'd recommend if you wash your hands that you don't use a hand sanitizer or an antibacterial. Use something just basic and simple like Ivory or something, And then also what we found in this book was that community is extremely helpful and extremely important, and contributes to long-term survival and anti-aging, simply because it's seen as one of these beneficial things that helps perpetuate the species, which I thought was really fascinating. And on that note, having vision and purpose, which is basically a will to survive, a thrive to survive, is extremely important and beneficial. And I'm very lucky that I am doing something that I absolutely love. I love helping people. I love sharing this message. I don't care if I had $1 billion, if I inherited some money. Actually, we just bought some lottery tickets. We were out in California. If we win the Mega Millions or whatever it was we bought tickets to, I don't care. I'd be doing the same exact thing. I'd just make it a better experience for everybody. I'm lucky to be doing that. And at the same time, I think everybody can find that, because this did not just happen to me. I found health first. And when I found health, then my vision and purpose and all that stuff started to open up. So that's a big plug for doing your best to find your way to real food and figure out real food and all these other things we consider necessary for health. If you feel like you don't know what your purpose or vision is or any of that kind of stuff, then I would say start with health. Things start to open up, your perspective changes, and I feel like first of all, we can all have a million different visions and missions and all that kind of stuff. I don't think there is any one right answer or destiny for anyone. I think that it's honestly it's not about wrong or right turns. It's about new turns and your perspective on those new turns. But figuring out health is going to be a big help with all that stuff. So here is my summary of all that different stuff that we just talked about. Number one, eat for nutrients. Don't eat too much and don't eat too often. Nurture space in between meals. We teach that all the time, but now for us veterans, I would say start to err on the side of eating less at meals. You have a serving, don't stuff yourself. Try to sit with it a little bit and think about space and going with less. Train your body for self-sufficiency and fat burning and metabolic flexibility. Experiment with fasting, which we teach all the time. exercise regularly and try to do it functionally. Try to think about general preparedness, because what's the point anyway? If something happens and we have an emergency, or if you're stranded somewhere, or whatever, like, you want to be able to do something and not just be able to push some machines around. Although that would be that's better than not doing anything. But I think you understand what I'm saying. You want to do fitness in a way that prepares you to do something in the future. All right. When you're washing your hands, I would just use regular soap, or you know what I do now? I have a spray bottle of vinegar in my office and at my home, and I don't even use soap anymore. I just spray vinegar on my hands and wipe them together like that, and that's how I wash my hands. Sometimes I even wash my face like that. So, well, I don't know if I need to go there or not. So in the shower, I use Miracle Soap too. I don't use Bronner's anymore, and I only use it in my armpits and my private parts. You know, I try to just use water on the rest of my body. So. Spend time with others, and spend time helping others, and spend time thinking about what you can do to be a part of this beautiful thing that we got going on, you know. And if you don't know, just sit and ask the questions. Sometimes having some quiet time and sitting there saying, I want to be a part of this. I want to help, but I'm not sure how. Bring me some clarity. Show me something, you know. Open up my perspective, you know. Give me some insight, and magically things start to happen when you have that kind of perspective, because your unconscious mind is now looking for answers. It's looking for solutions, or your higher self, or whatever you want to call that, your spirit. And sit daily and think about what you want for your life, not just how you can serve, but also what you want for your life. And again, not knowing what you want is perfectly fine, but you need to ask the question, what is it that I want? What is it that I want to do? Okay? All right, I think I rattled on a little bit longer than I wanted to, but I feel like that was some useful information for those of you that want to stick through it. All right, love you guys so much. Talk to you soon. All right, come on, bud. Ugh.